Hey, welcome to Focus Group. So glad you could join us. We're having a look and continuing this overcoming tyranny look. It sounds like tinny, overcoming tyranny series. And there's a really fascinating part of this where, of course, in Exodus, we're looking at, by the very nature of the title of Exodus, the leaving of something. That's what Exodus means. I'm leaving something, to exit something, to exodus something. And so in chapter 6, where we pick up the story from last week, let me just remind us all from the last time we met, we had a quick look at Moses, and he's gone through this whole calling of God, the burning bush moment. He's gone through this entire series of, Lord, what do you want from my life? And he's now going through this situation where God's assuring him, hey, I'm going to give you these signs. He does that. And of course, Pharaoh doubled down on their workload. It's one of the traps of the enemy to get you incredibly busy in doing what it is, or keeping you off your life purpose and your assignment and what you should be doing. And the Lord's been showing me a lot about this stuff, how the devil will try to stop you from doing what it is that he's called you to do, and the traps. I heard an interesting line this week, if there's no way the enemy can get into your house, there's no sin, there's no, your family are pretty tight, this sort of stuff, he'll send a narcissist to your door. And I thought that was a really fascinating topic. And God's been showing me a lot about narcissism lately, which is really, really interesting. In the meantime, let's pick up the story from chapter 6, and we're going to do it tonight in the Amplified Bible Classic Edition. Classic Amplified Edition. And the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. Oh boy, when the Lord says that, now you shall see what I'm going to do to somebody. It's like, get set, fasten your seatbelt. What's going to happen? For, compelled by a strong hand, he will not only let them go, but he will drive them out of his land with a strong hand. So God is showing Moses the end here and what to expect along the way. He's going to get tougher and stronger and stronger, and that strength will then drive them out and say, get out of here. And God said to Moses, I am the Lord. What a huge statement that is. No matter what your situation might be, how unorthodox the situation might be, God is reminding Moses here who he is. I am the Lord. I am the Supreme One. I am the Lord of the universe. I'm in control. I'm here. And he goes on and he reminds him of the history and the dynasty that Moses has come from. He says, I appeared to Abraham. Now, Abraham is the father of our faith, the one that got all the promises of God. I appeared to Isaac and to Jacob as God Almighty, El Shaddai. Notice the names of God here, they vary, explaining the different characters of him. El Shaddai means God with us. But my name, the Lord Yahweh, which is the redemptive name of God, I did not make myself known to them in acts and great miracles. Now, this is interesting. The word Yahweh was never pronounced by the Jews. And when it was written, they would write it in the scrolls and throw away the pen. That's how sacred it was. But we pronounce it that way in the English for the sake of interpretation. And redemption, of course, means to buy back. So, in other words, we were lost to sin, and it would take a price to buy us back. We were close to God. We had communion with God before sin, as humanity is concerned. He sends his son Jesus to die in our place for the place of sin. He buys us back. It's like this. Let's say that I lost my watch, all right? And I lost it, and I'm going around and I see it in a pawn shop, right? And I want to buy it back. Hey, that's my watch. I've been looking for that. I then pay money for something that was already mine. I redeem it. I buy it back, right? This is what God has done for each of us. And so the names of God are very pertinent to his character and what he pours out to us. He said, I did not make myself known to them in acts and great miracles. In other words, to your forefathers. It kind of preempts what I'm about to do. And I've also established my covenant with them. God is a God of covenant. And I think we really lose the meaning of that in our society when we are so flippant sometimes about relationships. For example, I think there's been a huge movement, against marriage over the decades in terms of, hell, just shack up together and live together, right? Not recognizing the importance of covenant and covenant relationship. Covenant is about promise to each other. And these covenants, God cannot break his covenant with us. And he makes a covenant in the Old Testament with them. And in the New Testament for us, he's renewed it. It's a stronger covenant. It's for us, I shall be their God, they shall be my people. I shall know them from the least of them, they shall know me from the least of them to the greatest of them. So who do you think gets the better end of the deal? I will be your God, you shall be my people. We get the better deal because he's so good and pure, and we're so imperfect in that. And yet he sends his son in our place to die for our sin for imperfect us. It's an incredible story of love. And when we, of course, do communion, that's when we share in the blood and the bread or the juice or the wine or the juice representing his blood. And then you have the bread representing his broken body. It's reminding us of the covenant that he has made with us and sealed with his blood. That's how strong this is. And he says, I've established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan. In other words, their promised land. God wants you to come into your promised land, to come out of slavery, to exit it, to enjoy this great exodus and come into the promised land that he has destined for you, the land of their temporary residence in which they were strangers. In other words, they're in Egypt. It's a temporary residence place. They're strangers there. They're not meant to be there forever. And yet for 400 years, they have, and the descendants of Joseph have been there. And he says, I have also heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians have enslaved. So he hears our cry. This is the beautiful assurance that God gives us, that we are going through difficult things. He hears our earthly groaning. We long in our hearts for freedom, and we long in our hearts for rest. And God hears the groaning of enslavement, especially from sin, gave his redemptive son to free us from that. But he also knows that when we're in situations where we are trapped, he can hear our groaning and call out and reach out to us. And he says, Egyptians have enslaved, and I have earnestly remembered my covenant with their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he's got to fulfill this covenant. God cannot break his word. His word does not return to him void. It must go forward. And he says, accordingly, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord. So again, he's establishing himself. And it's that authority in his name that is so pertinent for us to capture. We know that we serve God. And I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will free you from their bondage, and I will rescue you with an outstretched arm, with special and vigorous action, and by mighty acts of judgment. So he's promised in just a few sentences there so much. I'm going to be your God. I am going to bring you out from this enslavement, and I am going to free you from the bondage, from the ones that have enslaved you, and I'll rescue with an outstretched arm. I'm going to take you out. It's like you are sinking in quicksand, and God is the hand that reaches out to you, his outstretched arm that you can just grab as you're sinking, and he pulls you up with his strength out of the miry clay, out of the quicksand there, and rescues us. You know, I remember in a situation in my life where I'd gone through a huge business breakup. And I'm thinking, man, now I'm starting not just again, but from the, behind the eight ball. I'm in my 40s. And I was like, Lord, what do I do? What do I do? And it was just thing after thing after thing would hit us, one thing after the other. We had a situation where, the tax man was wanting money out of us. The US tax man was wanting money out of us. We had a situation where one of you will be able to relate to this, of a property that was burnt down. There was a situation where all this stuff was just going on. We had rented out our home in Perth, and then we were getting malicious damage from that. My income had dropped by 70%. I had to move out of our house and rent it out, and then we get this malicious damage, and all this stuff just going one thing after the other after the other. And I remember feeling like we were in quicksand and going, when is this going to stop? And I said to the Lord, I know that you want to use this for your glory. I know what we're going through here is to help other people when they're going through financial pain. But Lord, this hurts. This really, really hurts. But this is a wonderful thing. He can rescue you with an outstretched arm. And I remember feeling at that moment that we're in quicksand and it's just like, where is the bottom? Every time it's like our feet would touch sand, that would fall away. And then we touch more sand and bang, that would fall away. And it's kind of like, where is the bottom? Where is this all going? Everything that I've built over the years is just dying in front of me. And God brought me to a point where I had to cry out to him and go, Lord, only you can get me out of this trap. And he says there in verse 7, and I will take you to me, and I will take you to me for a people. In other words, I'll gather you as a people. I'm going to take you to myself. He's a jealous God. I want you. I want you. And I'll be to you a God. You know, it's nice to be wanted. You want your spouse to want you. You want the person who marries you to want you, not just marry you out of obligation, but they want you. I remember when I used to work in radio and was on the dating scene there, I was very cautious. Like, is this girl interested for me for what I do or who I am? Because you would get a lot of people who would approach you just to get publicity for their band, for their promotion or whatever, try to get free publicity out of you. And you can become a little bit wary of people going, why do you want to be my friend? It's because of my role in the workplace, or it's because you actually want to get to know me. And so it's kind of interesting how that is. And isn't it wonderful? The only person that you really want to be wanted by is God. He wants us. He wants us, right? It's fascinating when people want to be associated in their network for someone because they believe that that individual can get them something. And that's the whole key here. This is a real trap for people who've got a lot of money as well. Yeah, exactly. My good looks. Exactly. Thank you. In the comments there. Exactly. It's wonderful to know that you can rely on God, that no matter how bad you've blown it, he still wants you because you're his kid. He has created you for a purpose and plan. And he offers that all to all of us. He calls us. And he says, I'll be to you a God, and you and that phrase there, I will be to you a God. I will be to you a God. I will be the God you need me to be. I will be to you what you need me to be. We need a God intervention in some situations and circumstances we find ourselves in. And he says, and you shall know that it is I, the Lord your God, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. In other words, there is going to be no second guessing who did this. You'll know it's me. It'll be by my hand. It'll be such a big move that you'll know it's I, the Lord, who's done it, and not by your own hand. And I will bring you into the land concerning which I lifted up my hand. Let me read that again. And I'll bring you into the land concerning which I lifted up my hand and swore that I would give it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I'll give it to you for a heritage. I am the Lord. You have the pledge of my changeless omnipotence and faithfulness. So look at this for a moment. He's saying, I can't go back on my word to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm giving this to you for your inheritance, for your heritage, to pass on to your children and your children's children. I'm bringing you into that land. And, you know, sometimes we feel that we have to do it in our own strength. Folks, there is the opportunity where we have to take action when God instructs us to do stuff and be obedient. And when he tells us to do something, to be busy about his work, absolutely. But there are times and situations where it is only by the hand of God that can get us through the situation. And you may be in a situation like that. It's like, Lord, I can only do so much. You have to intervene here. I need the strategy from you to get me out of this pit. And he says, I'll do it. You'll know it's for me doing it. And you see, the beauty of that is when he does it, it takes the burden and pressure off us. It's not like it's something that we have to carry by our own toil, by our own effort. It's a situation where God goes, I'm going to move my hand right now. I'm going to do it. I'm stepping in to your situation. And the beauty of this is he gets the glory because it's like, man, I'm not that good. Only God could have done this. However, the pattern is this: he gets the glory. And while he gets the glory, we get the benefits. All right. And, you know, you can see this throughout the Bible. You see it when Jesus is born and the angels declare to the shepherds in the field, glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, goodwill to all men. The first statement, glory to God in the highest. Jesus is born, the Messiah, the one who's turning everything out. changing for humanity. It's the escape out of their sin. Man, not only does that happen, but he says, peace on earth, goodwill to men. In other words, we get the benefits of this incredible event. So this is the pattern that we see with God. He wants the glory. He wants the glory. And Moses told this in verse 9 to the Israelites, but they refused to listen to Moses because of their what? Impatience and anguish of spirit, and because of their cruel bondage. Whoa. There's a warning for all of us. Do not let impatience rob you of the blessing of God. Do not let anguish of spirit rob you from your faith and destroy faith. Do not allow the cruel bondage of the enemy to rob your hope from God. That is a warning to us, big time. Remember, do not be impatient. A lot of people, this is the thing, they get impatient for the promise of God to be fulfilled because they think it's going to be in their time frame, or it should happen and have expectations. It should happen by this frame. It should have happened by now. And the temptation of working through that in that delay is that you start to give up. Well, if God was going to do it, he would have done it by now. He's forgotten me. And they forget that God cannot go back on his word. Look at this promise that God has given. It's been generations. It's been 4 generations, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? Then there's Joseph, and then another 400 years before this comes into fulfillment. That's a long time. It's been delayed, but in God's perfect timing, he's rolling this out for them. And that, I think, is really important to understand. Guys, when God gives you a promise, do not get impatient. Hold on. He cannot go on his word. And don't allow anguish of spirit within you to rob you and to rob you of the promise of God. Do not allow the cruel bondage of the enemy to be the thing that disheartens you and loses hope. The Lord said to Moses, go in, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his land. That's pretty bold. That's pretty specific. All right. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, my own people, the Israelites have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh give heed to me, who am of deficient and impeded speech? He had a stutter. He's nervous. He's going, if the Israelites don't believe me, how's Pharaoh going to do that? But the Lord spoke to Moses, and now we've got confirmation with his brother Aaron, and gave them a command for the Israelites and for Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. So he's getting confirmation by a third-person testimony here, all right, that this command has got to go forward. These are, and then it switches gears. So this is incredible, this lead up to this. God is saying, giving him specific instructions. God's showing him the end from the beginning, what's going to happen. He's assured him, this is Pharaoh, he's going to push you out. He shows them how he's going to, well, not all the details, but he says, I'm going to make myself known. You're going to see this in great miracles. He gives them all this assurance. And now we switch gears in this writing. It says, these are the heads of their clans. Now, this goes into genealogies. You got to remember, this is also a historical book. So we'll go through this. But it's amazing what God is revealing. I wish I had such a great record of my ancestry. The Jews were very big on ancestry. And it's important to them because they wanted to show that Jesus was actually humanity. And you read it in the Gospels, in Matthew and Luke, it goes into great extent, proving where Jesus has come in his lineage. These are the heads of the clans, the sons of Reuben. Remember, Reuben was the eldest son of Jacob. All right, the sons of Reuben, Israel's firstborn, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. So we're going to go through 400 years now of generations. The sons of Simeon, Jamul, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These are the families of Simeon. All right, so Simeon was another son of Jacob. These are the names of the sons of Levi, who were dedicated to be the Levites, the priests of God. According to the births, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, and Levi lived 137 years. The sons of Gershon, Libni, and Shimei by their families. The son of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel, and Kohath lived 133 years. The sons of Merari, Mahali, and Mushi, these are the families of Levi according to their generations. Amram took Jochebed, his father's sister, as wife, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. And Amram lived 137 years. So Moses' father is Amram, and his mother is Jochebed. All right. The sons of Izhar, Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri. The sons of Uzziel, Mishael, Elzaphan, and Sithri. Aaron, okay, Moses' brother, took Elisheba, daughter of Aminadab, and sister of Nahshon, as wife. She bore him Nadab, Abihu, Eliezer, and Ithamar. The sons of Korah, Aser, Elkanah, and Abisasaph. These are the families of the Korahites. Eliezer, Aaron's son, took one of the daughters of Putiel as wife, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the heads of the father's house of the Levites by their families. Now, Aaron becomes the high priest of Israel, guys. This is important. So the Levitical line is there, and Aaron is the first high priest. He becomes this later when they go into the desert and leave Israel. These are the same Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring out the Israelites from the land of Egypt by their hosts, and who spoke to the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, about bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. These are that Moses and Aaron. So it's saying this is the 400 years of generations since Joseph to there. Now remember, guys, that incredible wealth was upon the family of Joseph and his fathers and brothers. They experienced that in the middle of the famine. Incredible wealth. What's happened to that? They've lost it all. They are slaves now in Egypt because they forgot the goodness of Joseph to Pharaoh 400 years later. And then it goes on, and who spoke to the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. These are that Moses and Aaron. On the day when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, the Lord said to Moses, again, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I say to you. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, I am of deficient and impeded speech. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? How often we feel we are inadequate to do the purposes of God. He's to declare these great things, and he suffers from a stammer. He's got Aaron to help him there. And this thing keeps coming up because he said this at the burning bush. You know, I'm impeded of speech. And God gets quite angry with him. He says, fine, I'll send Aaron with you. He brings it up again. He brings it up again. You know, we can look at this and go, this is a weakness, or we can go, this impediment that we all have in some ways in different areas of our life is the very thing that keeps us reliant on the strength of God to do his purpose and plan for our lives. So, guys, it's so important that we stay reliant on him. It's so important that we recognize the authority of God and says, I am the Lord. It's so important that we recognize the heritage we have, especially if you're several generations where they have served God. But remember, within that, though, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you haven't had that heritage, you can start it for the next generations. You can be the one that changes the path that your children are on or your children's children are on. You're the one that can stand in the gap. So these are the incredible things. And I think it's really important to remember the covenant of God, the authority of him. I am your God. You are my people. The desire and passion he has to have our worship, to be in service to him. And that's not a burden. His yoke is easy, his burden is light. But when we find ourselves in situations where it will take a miracle to get us out of this trap, we can realize he says, I will move by my hand. I will deliver you. And he gets the glory out of it. It's not by our smarts. It's not by our cleverness. It's by the hand of God. There's a lot in that. If you have any questions or comments, gentlemen, that you want to do on this one, there's a lot in this chapter.
Yeah, the main cruel bondage we have nowadays is taxation.
Taxation, and I'd also say interest on loans as well. Debt. Debt is one of the biggest reasons human trafficking happens in the earth. Big time. Very good. It was never God's design taxes. It was never God's design interest on loans. Except you would never do that to a fellow Jew. A fellow Jew would never charge their brother or sister interest. Yeah, but he did
One,
say, "You shall be a borrower to nations." So he expects the nations to be charged interest, but not the fellow Jews.
one
But
thing
it's
that is
okay for them to
amazing.
do it to Gentiles.
Sorry, you both speak at once. Go ahead, Aidan.
But it's okay for them to do it to Gentiles.
Gentiles, but now we have been grafted in to the vine. The New Testament tells us that we've been grafted in.
One of
Because
the things that I find amazing is how much work people will put into something which is detrimental to people. How much work they will put into theft.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
If
Deception's a
they
big thing.
Well, if they put the same amount of effort into creating genuine wealth and helping people, they would be so much further ahead. And they'd have less stress on themselves, which they don't seem to realise.
True. However, I think when people are really enslaved to debt and that, they get desperate and turn to crime because I see that as an easier option sometimes. Doesn't mean it's right, but sometimes I think that's why some people get incredibly desperate. You'll notice in society, the more affluent areas have less crime, and the less affluent people areas have more crime.
Mm.
I can think of a suburb near me. You drive around that area. I used to have to frequent that area fairly often. You'd always see police cars everywhere, all the time. Highly patrolled area. You're on mute, and
I would
Oh,
argue, I would argue that there are places that indicate quite the opposite.
there is high crime as well, right? In terms of, it sounds like it's better crime. There is crime where in affluent areas there's more embezzlement going on.
I'll give an example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, there was a speech the other night.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The ones on one side that are complaining have made an incredible amount more money than the ones on the other side who are busy getting the work done.
Yep. Yeah. Cleaning house. Absolutely.
Now
And look at the crime that Pharaoh did to Israel. Right? Look at this. He absolutely looked at these people not as people, but as a commodity. Jew dies. Well, we just got to get another one. Got to get another Israeli.
Now, I know that will be redressed, and I think one of the passages which leads to that comes from I think it's Haggai, but yeah, I just needed to go contrarian on you there, Derek, to highlight a particular point.
Thank you for showing me that. Yep, you're right. Sometimes the crime is far less obvious.
And caught up in bureaucracy.
Yep. Good point. Good point. And wickedness, but the truth has a sneaky way of coming out. Good point. Very good. All right. Well, we'll wind up this recording now. And then if you want to hang around for a couple of minutes, we can. For those of you watching this video, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you can join us live on focus groups. If you'd like to join us live, you can. Simply go to our website, supernaturalfinance.com, fill out the box there, and we can send you the links to these groups. We'd love to have you here participating in focus groups where it's encouraging, one, with your relationship with Jesus, two, to do your life purpose, and three, to be able to start planning strategically with others who are also wanting to influence the world in a mountain of influence for the kingdom of God. Thanks for joining us again. Catch you soon.